If you find yourself constantly self-monitoring and like the spotlight is constantly on you, then here's how to break the cycle of self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is a heightened level of awareness of oneself as an individual. It's different to self-awareness, which is often a neutral observation of oneself. Self-consciousness is a heightened awareness that's often judgmental and normally comparative. It's evaluating how you are being in real time. Why is self-consciousness happening? So first of all, self-consciousness is triggered beyond our control initially. The trigger happens and self-consciousness follows. We often have very little control over that first process, but we can change how we respond, which one, impacts how long self-consciousness lasts, and two, limits how much it comes up in the future as our brain begins to rewire that actually this is something we don't need to be afraid of. So, number one is to change your attentional focus. Self-consciousness is maintained by a hyper-awareness or a hyper-attentional focus on yourself. We can think of self-consciousness a little bit like a torch or a flashlight. When you are present, when you are focused, that attentional focus or that torch or flashlight is generally shining outside of yourself. It's on the person or the situation, or sometimes it's kind of in a neutral position. But when you're self-conscious, that attentional torch has come completely onto yourself. You are completely focused on yourself and your own inner world. When you feel the pull inwards, you need to focus on bringing that attentional flashlight outwards. When you're getting used to this, your brain will battle with you, and that's okay. Even a few degrees outwards is still progress. And to begin with, it may be really hard to bring your attention outwards, and so you may need to purposefully focus on what is in front of you, what you can see, what colors, the vowels in somebody's language, whatever it is, to really purposefully bring your attention outside of yourself. And you may find you come back in, and that's okay. The work is continuously bringing yourself back out. Number two, you have to stop reacting to the sensations that come with self-consciousness. So when we are self-conscious, we normally have a rush of anxiety symptoms, or the anxiety symptoms are what triggered self-consciousness. So for example, a racing heart, shaking hands, sweaty palms, whatever it is, we have anxiety sensations that we don't want, and we're often afraid that they're visible to other people. And so naturally, we want these sensations to go away or end. But the more we resist and fight these symptoms, one, the more our attention comes inwards, which is already a problem, as we've seen, and two, the more we escalate them. Every time you resist an anxiety sensation, try to get rid of it, try to push it away, try to will it away, it only escalates because you are telling your brain, I don't want this. This is something to be scared of. And of course, it's understandable we don't want these symptoms, but you must not see anxiety as a problem. You must begin to see anxiety just as sensation, like any other sensation in the body that you might not have a reaction to, like a headache or a mild toothache. Reacting is what is making it last longer and contributing to a fear of anxiety in the future, and it is exacerbating self-consciousness. The moment you stop reacting to symptoms, and I mean really stop reacting, is the moment they pass. I'm going to upload a whole different video on a technique you might use to do this, but for now, just practice non-reactivity. Okay, my heart is pounding. Okay. Okay, I have a lump in my throat. Okay. And coming back to your attentional focus and bringing it back outside of yourself. And number three, stop expecting yourself to not be self-conscious. And this is something people don't talk about very much. The idea of I should not be self-conscious right here, right now, in this situation with these people creates an expectation. And because you have no control over the initial self-consciousness, by its very presence, you violate your own expectation. That creates more stress, and you begin to battle against what should happen with what is happening, which only again exacerbates self-consciousness. And actually, most of the time when we feel self-conscious, it is quite normal and it is quite human. It's the battle against it that exacerbates it or makes it such an intense experience. When I'm filming this video, of course I have an element of self-consciousness, but I'm not focusing on it, which allows me to come outside of myself and speak how I wish to speak. Imagine your next event where you think you're going to feel self-conscious and say to yourself, actually, it's okay if I feel self-conscious there. I don't expect myself to feel any differently. The moment you say that, how does that event now feel? It might not feel comfortable, but it might feel significantly less pressurizing. It's not saying we want to be self-conscious, that we want to have anxiety, but it's releasing the secondary battle and cycle of what's happening once self-consciousness is triggered. Because the moment we shift our attention, Stop reacting to anxiety and release expectations is the moment we move out of self-consciousness. It becomes a much more short-lived experience or something that's so mild that it just isn't a problem to you. Now, a lot of people practice these techniques or watching this video and they say, well, yeah, that's all great, but I don't want to feel self-conscious in the first place. How do I get rid of that? And so to that, there are a few answers. Self-consciousness that isn't going away with techniques or feels like a significant problem really deserves significant help, like therapy and or coaching, depending on your difficulties. But number two, the fear of self-consciousness as an experience is partly what keeps it going, because when we're afraid of it, we are already entering situations in a heightened state of anxiety in case it happens. So the moment you feel like you're in control of it and that it no longer controls you means you'll actually have less anticipatory anxiety, which means self-consciousness is less likely to happen in the future anyway. So by using these techniques and changing your relationship to self-consciousness, you are impacting how much it will come up in the future. But of course, if you're really struggling, always seek professional help. Many people struggle with chronic self-consciousness and self-monitoring, and there is support available. If you try these techniques out, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear how they helped and what you used them with, or any questions you have about them. And I hope you found it helpful.